I am calling it right now. The era of the zero marginal cost software business is dead, like officially completely dead.
Oh, absolutely. It is a massive blind spot for anyone looking at tech today.
Right, because if you were sitting there thinking that the artificial intelligence industry is just, another software product, you really need to rewire your thinking because AI is not software.
No, not at all.
It is heavy industry, and its unit economics are an absolute unmitigated disaster.
Which is so hard for people to grasp.
Right.
Because we have spent, the last 2 or 3 decades conditioned by Silicon Valley to view technology as this magical infinite margin machine.
Yep, the golden goose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the physical reality of what we are building today is just colliding violently with those financial expectations. We are seeing a total structural breakdown in how value is actually created and, captured.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand why this is such a huge crisis, we really need to look at why the traditional software model was, essentially the greatest business model ever invented in human history.
Oh, without a doubt. It was a money printing anomaly.
Right. So think about something like Microsoft Excel. When Microsoft originally built Excel, they spent a massive amount of money up front, right?
Yeah, they had to pay all those developers, fund the basic research, run beta tests.
Right. It was this huge sunk cost. But once the code was compiled and completely finished, every single time you or I buy a copy of Excel or, download a security update, it costs Microsoft practically nothing to deliver it to us.
And that is the textbook definition of zero marginal cost. The cost to produce one additional unit is effectively zero.
Right.
So you have a flat line for your fixed costs, but your revenue line just scales infinitely. And that widening gap between those two lines, that is pure profit.
And that exact financial mechanism is what turns software companies into the most valuable entities on Earth. Wall Street has been trained for 25 years to look for that specific graph.
But generative AI completely shatters that graph, like it breaks the whole model.
It really does, because every single time you type a prompt into an AI, every single time you ask it to summarize a PDF or, generate an image of a cat riding a skateboard, it physically costs the AI company money.
Real tangible money.
Yes. It is not just lines of code floating in the ether. That prompt travels to a data center. It spins up these highly specialized graphics processing units or GPUs. It burns massive amounts of electricity. And this is the crazy part. It causes actual wear and tear on the physical hardware.
Because it is literally thermodynamics. The chips degrade over time. It is a physical combustion process happening right there at the silicon level.
Yeah.
These GPUs operate at blistering temperatures. They require thousands of gallons of water or these massive liquid cooling systems just to keep them from melting down. So when you run an AI model, you are renting industrial computing power, not just copying a file.
So if we look at the financials, we see what our sources call a linear cost trajectory. Unlike Microsoft Excel, where 1 million new users means free money falling from the sky, in the AI world, 1 million new users means a massive immediate spike in your electricity bills.
And your hardware replacement costs.
Exactly. As your revenue goes up, your server costs rise simultaneously right alongside it. The profit gap never actually opens up.
Which completely reframes how we should be evaluating these companies, right?
Yeah.
Because they're being valued by the market as software companies. But if you look closely, their profit and loss statements look like industrial manufacturers.
Our sources actually use this brilliant analogy for this. Because AI is stuck on this linear cost trajectory, the industry is currently operating less like a tech giant and more like, a failing restaurant.
A very expensive failing restaurant.
Right, because think about it. Every time a meal gets served, somebody has to physically buy the ingredients. But the AI industry is acting like a restaurant that loses money on every single meal it cooks.
Yeah.
And their grand master plan to finally achieve profitability, just serve more food.
Which defies basic arithmetic. You cannot make up a negative margin on volume if the core unit cost remains higher than the revenue it generates.
And the raw numbers behind this are staggering. What did OpenAI actually burn through recently? Because if they are a restaurant, the food costs must be astronomical.
Oh, it is wild. Let's look at the projected financials for 2025. OpenAI is on track to burn through $20.9 billion in a single year.
Wow. 20 billion.
Yes. And the underlying structural problem, the thing that should truly terrify investors, is that their margins are actually getting worse with every new, more advanced model they release.
Wait, really? Shouldn't it be the other way around? Usually technology gets cheaper and more efficient as it evolves, right?
In traditional computing, sure. But frontier AI models require exponentially more compute power to train and run. To make a model 10 times smarter, you don't just need 10 times the compute.
Right.
You might need 100 or 1,000 times the compute. The infrastructure requirements are just scaling far faster than the efficiency gains.
Which completely shatters that old Silicon Valley defense. You always hear people say, oh, well, Amazon lost money for years, just be patient. At scale, the margins will improve.
Exactly.
But Amazon's margins improved because building more warehouses eventually lowered their shipping costs per package. In AI, building bigger models actually increases the cost per prompt.
And the private markets are finally starting to wake up to this reality. I mean, OpenAI recently had to push their potential IPO to 2027 because institutional investors flat out refused to give them a $1 trillion valuation.
He actually looked at the books.
Yeah, they looked at the books and realized there is no mathematical proof that specialized silicon or new chip architectures will bring these operational costs down fast enough to justify that kind of market cap.
And it isn't just the AI labs carrying this risk. The collateral damage is spreading all the way down to the infrastructure level. I was looking at Oracle's annual report for this deep dive, and it literally reads like a horror story.
Oh, Oracle is one of the brightest red flashing lights in the global economy right now. They are building out 7.1 gigawatts of capacity for OpenAI's upcoming Stargate project.
Right, Stargate.
And to give you some context on the scale of heavy industry we were talking about here, 7.1 gigawatts is the equivalent output of several nuclear power plants.
Just for one single customer.
Yes.
For a customer that, as we just established, is losing $20 billion.
Exactly. And to pay for that infrastructure, OpenAI will need to generate an estimated $75 billion in annual revenue just to cover the compute costs of Stargate.
Which is insane.
If they can't generate that, and currently their core business operates at a massive loss, Oracle is left holding the bag for billions in sunk infrastructure costs.
Right, I saw that. Oracle's own annual report had to legally cite the material risk that they might not actually get paid by their AI customers.
Yeah, and if that default happens, Oracle's stock is in severe jeopardy, along with the personal margin loans held by their founder, Larry Ellison.
It is a house of cards built on melting silicon. But if the core economics are really this bad, if everyone is losing money on every prompt, how is the market still booming? I mean, we keep hearing about this massive demand for chips.
What's fascinating here is the illusion of demand, specifically how it is being artificially engineered in the hardware sector. We really need to look closely at NVIDIA and the rise of what are called the neo clouds.
Yes, this is the part of our research that legitimately made my jaw drop. So, NVIDIA is selling billions of dollars in highly specialized AI chips. But when you look at who is actually buying them, it isn't just Google and Microsoft.
Right.
They are selling massive quantities to these smaller, relatively unknown cloud infrastructure companies.
The neo clouds. Companies like Core, Nebius, Iron, Cipher Mining, and TeraWulf. They're essentially data center operators that buy NVIDIA GPUs and then rent out the computing power.
But a traditional bank isn't going to lend a tiny data center billions of dollars to buy computer chips, right? So how are they affording this?
Well, they aren't going to traditional banks. NVIDIA is stepping in and essentially funding these companies.
Wow.
NVIDIA provides the capital backing, takes equity, or extends credit facilities so these neoclouds can buy the chips. But here is where the financial engineering gets truly wild.
Okay.
NVIDIA is then turning around and paying these exact same companies to rent the GPUs back to NVIDIA once they're installed in the data centers.
Okay, let me make sure I have this straight, because it sounds like a cartoonish loophole.
It really does.
It's exactly like going to a car dealership, right?
Yeah.
And the dealership lends you the money to buy a fleet of their cars.
Yep.
Then the dealership pays you to rent those exact same cars back from you for the weekend.
Exactly.
And then the dealership goes to Wall Street, points to the initial sale and says, look at our massive consumer demand. We are selling so many cars.
It is a closed-loop system of capital. You are essentially buying back your own equipment to simulate market velocity and pad your revenue numbers.
That is wild.
And historically, across any sector, when an industry starts engaging in this kind of circular financing, there is only one fundamental reason why. They do not have enough real organic customers.
Which naturally leads to the obvious question for you listening, where are the real customers? Because if we look at the absolute titans, Microsoft, Google, Meta, Amazon, they were pouring hundreds of billions into AI data centers.
Yeah.
So where is the actual return on that investment coming from?
You won't find it on their balance sheets.
Yeah.
Or at least
Right.
they're going to incredible lengths to ensure you can't isolate it.
The silence from big tech is absolutely deafening. I mean, think about how these companies usually operate. They report everything.
Right, down to the penny.
Exactly. They will break down their traditional cloud revenue, their advertising revenue, their YouTube subscriptions down to the decimal point for investors. But their specific, standalone, generative AI revenue, it is a complete black box.
It is an accounting camouflage technique.
Hmm.
Their legacy businesses, traditional search, e-commerce, basic web hosting, those are still highly profitable cash cows. So they're using those massive healthy revenues to hide the billions they are bleeding in the AI division. They conflate their overall corporate growth with AI driving that growth.
But if you look at the quarterly earnings calls, neither Microsoft nor Amazon will share their actual profit and loss for AI specifically. They only offer these really vague metrics like a revenue run rate.
And we know that public companies love to brag. If AI was generating massive standalone profits, they would be printing the numbers on billboards in Times Square.
Oh, 100%.
The fact that they are hiding it inside broader cloud metrics means they only have bad news to hide.
And for now, the stock market is just playing along. Institutional investors are holding their breath, operating on this one massive underlying assumption.
It is.
That if and when the profits finally arrive, it will be the American tech giants who capture all of that value. The assumption is that the U.S. will build models so advanced, the rest of the world will simply have no other option but to pay their exorbitant prices.
But let's look at the global supply chain and the international reality here. As the assumption that the U.S. is building an insurmountable moat seems incredibly fragile when you actually look at the data.
Yeah, it really does.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the third and perhaps most fatal problem with the American AI business model is China. We really have to look at the spending disparity because it exposes a massive vulnerability.
The gap is wild. The United States is mobilizing capital like we are going to war. We are spending roughly $764 billion this year on AI infrastructure and research, and we are heading rapidly toward $1 trillion next year.
And to put that in macroeconomic terms, the U.S. is spending about 3% of its entire GDP on this single sector.
Okay, and what is China spending to compete with that?
China is spending roughly $102 billion this year. That is just 0.6% of their economy.
So the U.S. is outspending China nearly 10 to 1. My first instinct looking at that is, well, obviously the U.S. is going to win. There's no way a country dealing with U.S. chip export bans and spending a fraction of the capital can keep up with $1 trillion mobilization.
And that assumes the technology requires a linear investment. But China has figured out an incredibly efficient structural advantage. I call it distillation arbitrage.
Okay, break down the mechanics of that. How does distillation actually work in this context?
So training a frontier AI model from scratch, the physics of the universe, logic, reasoning, advanced mathematics that requires massive supercomputers running for months.
Right.
It is basically the hardest trial and error research in human history, full of dead ends and wasted compute. The United States is paying for all of that expensive trial and error.
Okay.
China is simply letting the U.S. spend the trillions, and then they are copying the final homework.
But wait, how do you copy a neural network? They aren't just hacking in and stealing the source code, right?
No, they don't need to. They use a technique called the teacher-student model. You take a massive trillion-dollar American model, the teacher, and you ask it millions of complex questions.
Oh, I see.
You take all of those perfect finalized answers, which is called synthetic data, and you use it to train a brand new, much smaller model, the student.
Wow.
You distill the intelligence. You compress all that expensive U.S. research into smaller, highly efficient models that require a fraction of the compute to run.
And then they just flood the market with them.
Exactly. They often open source them, giving the underlying architecture away for free to the global developer community.
Which completely undercuts the entire business model of the American labs trying to charge premium subscription fees.
Yes.
So literally every dollar the U.S. spends pushing the frontier of AI research is effectively a taxpayer and shareholder donation to the Chinese AI industry.
Pretty much.
And the performance data proves this is working. Let's look at the head-to-head tests from our sources. So, a developer took a complex coding task and fed it to two different models. On one side, Claude Opus, which is one of the premier American models from Anthropic.
Right.
On the other side, GLM, which is a Chinese open source model.
And both models successfully finished the exact same task.
Yeah.
Both took about 5.5 minutes. The quality of the output was indistinguishable.
Okay, but what about the cost?
The American model cost $2.33 in compute power to run that task. The Chinese model cost 31 cents.
It is 7.5 times cheaper for the exact same result in the exact same amount of time. That completely destroys any pricing power the American labs thought they had.
And it isn't an isolated incident. If you look at the Artificial Analysis Intelligence Index, which is essentially the global leaderboard for benchmarking these AI models, the absolute top American model scores a 60. But GLM, that top Chinese open model, scores a 51. It is well within striking distance of the frontier. But more importantly, if you look at the middle of the pack on that global index, it is absolutely flooded with Chinese models. DeepSeek, Ken, Kimi, Minimax.
They are just swarming the middle of the market. And from a basic business perspective, the middle of the market is where all the actual money is.
Yes, exactly.
If I am a mid-sized logistics company or, a local bank, I don't need a god-tier omniscient AI that costs $3 a prompt to answer basic customer service emails about lost passwords.
No, of course not.
I just need a model that is good enough and cheap.
The U.S. is winning the race for the most capital incinerated in pursuit of a superbrain. China is winning the race for the actual customer by providing viable, low-cost utility.
The anecdote that really hammered this home for me was the DoorDash example.
Yes, Meituan.
Right.
They're essentially the Chinese equivalent of DoorDash or Uber Eats.
Yeah.
It's a food delivery app. They decided to build their own AI model called Longcat.
Which is just wild to think about.
And when you run it through agentic benchmarks, meaning tests that see if the AI can actually act as an agent, stringing together multiple steps on its own to solve a real-world problem rather than just spitting out text, this food delivery company's AI is going toe-to-toe with Google's Gemini.
Oh, wow.
It's actually beating older flagship models from Anthropic.
I really need everyone listening to pause and internalize what that means. A food delivery app built an AI that competes with Google.
Yeah.
If a company whose primary business is dropping off noodles can replicate the capabilities of a trillion-dollar American AI lab using a fraction of the budget, is that American AI lab actually worth $1 trillion? The moat doesn't exist.
The barrier to entry has completely collapsed.
Okay, wait. I have to push back here.
Okay, go ahead.
I have to channel the prevailing Silicon Valley defense for a minute because the people running these companies aren't stupid. They know these numbers. The entire thesis justifying this massive capital burn is AGI, artificial general intelligence.
The theoretical promise of a machine that can outthink a human at every conceivable economic and cognitive task.
Right. The argument is that, yes, the unit economics right now look like a failing restaurant. Yes, the server costs are astronomical.
Yeah.
But once these models cross the threshold into true AGI, the traditional financial metrics just won't matter. Because an AGI will be able to replace human labor across the board.
That's the pitch.
We are talking doctors, corporate lawyers, software engineers, financial analysts. If you invent a technology that functionally ends the need for human cognitive labor, the upfront cost is irrelevant. It is a long-term investment in a post-labor economy.
Right.
They believe the software will eventually write better software, design radically better chips, and cure diseases. The prize is so infinitely huge that spending a few $1 trillion today is actually a bargain.
You cannot innovate your way out of a physical physics problem. The servers are melting, the power grids are failing, and the margins are getting worse with every new model. You are predicting a sci-fi utopia to justify a terrible balance sheet.
But if the intelligence compounds,
It doesn't change the thermodynamics of a data center.
Right.
It's a fundamental miscalculation of energy and hardware limits. You cannot wave a magic wand of future AGI to excuse the fact that right now, today, the foundational unit economics are negative and degrading.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The reality of cooling these facilities, securing the land, and powering these chips does not care about a hypothetical post-labor utopia.
Okay, wow. You just brought the hammer down on the entire Silicon Valley dream board.
It is about looking at the industrial reality rather than the marketing brochure. And the industrial reality is a severe margin crisis.
So what does this all mean? When we look at this entire structural audit, the linear cost trajectory, the neocloud circular financing keeping demand artificially inflated, the distillation arbitrage by China wiping out the U.S. pricing power, it paints a very specific and, frankly, brutal picture of the future.
It really does.
The race is not going to be won by whoever builds the most mathematically perfect, hyper-expensive superbrain.
Exactly. The market will always seek the floor on pricing for utility. The source data confirms this perfectly.
Yeah.
When given the choice for a standard business application, the market is looking at an 18.5-cent task from an American model versus a 4-cent task from a Chinese model.
Wow.
That is a 76% discount for a difference in quality that the end consumer will likely never even notice.
A 76% discount. That is the kind of pricing pressure that bankrupts legacy industries overnight. When you are no longer selling infinite free copies of software, but instead selling compute cycles tied to physical energy and hardware, the lowest cost producer wins.
And right now, the lowest cost producer is not sitting in California. We are watching the transition from a software mindset to a heavy industry reality, and the dominant players just haven't realized they are playing a different game.
We started this deep dive talking about a failing restaurant. A restaurant that loses money on every meal but hopes that if it just serves enough food, some kind of AGI miracle will happen and change the laws of physics.
Which isn't going to happen.
No, because as we've seen, you can't outrun the cost of the ingredients.
Yeah.
And you certainly can't outrun a competitor who is serving the exact same meal for a quarter of the price.
Absolutely.
So I want to leave you with this. I want you to really think about the massive valuations, the hype, and the trillions of dollars being poured into these systems just to automate the most mundane tasks in our daily lives. If the smartest companies on earth are losing billions of dollars to answer your customer service emails, who is actually getting scammed?